Okay, in this tutorial I would like to discuss some of the basic points which we should take in consideration while developing an application with struts. Okay, so for any of the user who is working on struts or trying to develop any application using struts and Java, there are certain best practices which we should take in consideration while developing the application or starting with an application, or we can create a skeleton even before we are trying to start our actual application, so that while we are doing the actual development we do keep these practices in mind. So there are 7 best practices which I have collected and went through and have experienced these in my all projects. I would like to explain all these practices to you too. These practices are basically we commonly use in our project anytime we are doing the project, but still, keeping that in mind avoids the chances of errors. So let me start with the practices straight away. Taking the first practice, which says extend when you must. What does it mean? I have written certain some explanation along with the heading which I am stating here. So I am going through the explanation which I have written for any practice. Okay, for the first practice, which is extend when you must, but it says in a summary that struts framework can be stretched and customized to allow for the customized behavior, as we all of us know. Configuration classes in the struts framework, for example, struts configuration file, action servlet, request processor, can be substituted for a customized version. Declarative exception handling mechanism can also for the custom exception handlers be used for the better response to the application failures. Extension should be done judiciously. Before extending a framework, we should always make sure that the functionality doesn't already exist somewhere. Otherwise, we can use the already implemented or already used functionality. Okay, so coming on to the second practice, which is use application modules. As we know, struts provide this feature of splitting of a single struts application into multiple modules. So what does it say? Basically it tries to solve one problem which was there for long time, and it solves one of the biggest complaints that development group of more than a few people have had for some times, because we can create separate struts and configuration files for individual application. Each struts application module should have its own configuration file for the better management. This allows us to configure the separate actions, action forms, exception handling, and much more, independent of the other application module. So it's basically segregating the responsibility of the modules and configuring our dependencies and the main configuration files as per the module. Third practice, use declarative exception handling. And what does it mean? Struts framework includes a class called exception handler. Exception handler. This class by default is responsible for processing any exceptions that occur during action execution. This class actually creates an action error object and stores it in appropriate scope object. This allows the JSP pages to use the errors to inform the user of a problem. Customized exception handler classes can also be used. Okay, so the fourth practice, use a base action for your application. Often action in an application we need to perform some basic task. Any basic task we need to do in any application, action is required. So to ensure these tasks are implemented consistently, create a base action that can be subclassed by other actions in the application. Okay, fifth point, check logins at the controller level. At the controller level only, we need to provide all the login related checks for the centralized control of the application. Okay, sixth point, use validator framework for validating the user input. Validator framework, which is provided by struts, which is an basically inbuilt library. We can use that. It avoids and it saves a lot of time for validating the user input. Okay. Seventh practice, which is the last one, use custom tag instead of using scriptlets and the Java code into the JSP. As we all know that what are the disadvantages of using scriptlet and the Java code in our JSP pages. So avoid all those problems which are there in our traditional application, which are not written using any framework like JSF or struts. So struts provide a wonderful way of keeping us avoided from all those problems by using custom tags. Custom tags make our presentation layer much more presentable, and it removes the chances of many penetrations of the application which might take place if we will be using scriptlet or the Java code at our JSP layer. So these are the 7 best practices which I wanted to cover in this tutorial. I hope these will be very useful and will be used in any development project and will help you in making application more scalable, maintainable, more useful, and more error free, which I would say. Most useful fact by using these practices would be maintainability factor. You would be able to maintain your application well if you will use these practices. Please let me know if you have any question. I'll keep on posting more best practices and other tutorials about some other subjects. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me and having a look at this tutorial.